What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. Let's jump right in and talk about my junior year nursing experience. Junior year is a very difficult year because you're taking a lot of your major classes. So for me, this meant I was taking Adulterian and Family and Child Health. For our program, they had separated it into 2 different semesters. So at the end of my sophomore year, you had to pick what class you would take first, and I had wanted to take Family and Child with all of my friends in my previous study group. But unfortunately, some things came up. My practice schedule conflicted with almost all of the classes for Family and Child, so I wasn't able to take Family and Child with all of my friends. I had to end up switching courses and going into Adulterian. This change was really difficult for me personally because I had been studying with my group of friends for 2 years now, or a year and a half. I wasn't ready to let go of them, and I wasn't ready to branch off and be on my own without having my study group by my side. I may get emotional talking about junior year fall semester because it still is a sensitive subject for me. I experienced so much diversity. I overcame so many emotions and so many things that would have held me back if I wasn't who I am and if I wasn't this strong, persevering, tough girl. But before I get into that, let's start fresh. So I'm taking Adulterian my fall of my freshman year. I'm all alone. I feel very friendless. I just went through a breakup, and yeah, I'm starting like a really important year volleyball wise. But we're here to talk about nursing, so let's stay on track, Jules. Adulterian, this was a class that was more focused on like the med-surg portion of nursing. You learned about all the systems, again, very similar to health assessment, but then we learned more about how to make nursing diagnoses and making care plans. This class also had a hands-on portion, but instead of being in the lab with our dummies, we were actually going to the hospital once a week and shadowing a nurse, doing our own cares. We were student nurses. This was definitely one of my favorite experiences. It felt real. Like, this is the semester where it felt like what I had struggled with sophomore year was finally worth it. Focusing on clinicals, we dressed up in our green BSU scrub tops and had black pants. We showed up at 6:45 to start our shifts at 7. Our schedule on the days that we were at the hospital was 7 to 3, but from 1 to 3 would be a breakdown or like a meeting with our mentor. He was able to allow us to sit down with a cardiologist, the top cardiologist at the BSU hospital. We were able to speak down with senior and leader nurses. We were able to ask him all these questions about what we had saw and experienced during our clinical that day. Our group consisted of a solid like 6 to 8 people, and having this group honestly saved my life. I didn't really know them prior to this semester and prior to having them in my clinical group. I knew who they were. They were all nice people, but having such a good mentor, he really allowed our group to mesh really well. This is the group that changed the way that I study, and they changed the way that I view group projects, and they changed everything for me. Let's fast forward a little bit from in junior year fall semester. My family experienced a very traumatic event that my dad was in, and this affected me emotionally and physically. My first clinical, I remember receiving a phone call from my mom that this event had happened, and I was absolutely devastated and just broken down in tears. I didn't know whether I needed to go home and be with my family and drive the 8 hours and leave clinical and call my coach on the way. Yeah, so that was the first traumatic thing, or like the first really difficult roadblock that I had experienced. Thankfully, everything is fine and he's okay. It just was a lot of mental things that we all kind of had to deal with and accept the reality of the situation. Going forward with about creating the best study group, my study group really helped me, was there to support me during that that time a struggle. I didn't get to see my dad for a whole month, so my anxiety and my nerves were just really always on top of it. I just wasn't able to focus on school, and I couldn't get my work done whatsoever. I had so many distractions from family to volleyball, and I just knew I needed some guidance to help me focus and get through this very tough semester of school. Very similar to sophomore year, we had to get like a 70% average or 73% average on all of our tests. And in Adulterian, we had a test almost every other week. And so there was a lot of tests. And unfortunately, because of this event that happened, it was in the beginning of the semester, I hadn't been doing very well on my tests. And towards the end of the semester, when you're calculating out your grade and seeing if you'll pass or not, I was below the passing rate. Yeah, that's very scary, especially when you only have 2 tests to go. I told my nurse mentor this, and he really helped gather our group together, and he offered extra study sessions, and he brought his study books that really helped, and we were able to study and bounce things off of each other and stay really, really focused. And I think at that point, when I was about to fail out of the class, that was the point when my whole group decided to create a study group, and we made our famous study guides. I don't know if they're famous, but they're a really good study guide, and we had a really good group of people who were able to help me personally, but also themselves pass this class. I did end up passing. My last 2 tests were the highest scores I ever got on my nursing test that year. I was going in to see the teacher almost every week just to go over content that I missed, to go over the tests that I wasn't passing, and it was really helpful. And I highly suggest that if you are struggling in any of your classes, nursing or not, to go to your professor and ask as many questions as you can, because they are the ones who write and make the test. They know what's on it, so it's best to go to them. What made the actual group itself so beneficial? This is an example of a PowerPoint that we would get for our exam. This is 94 pages long. This is how we would take our PowerPoint and make it into a document. You go up here to View, and then Outline View. It'll show you what is on all of the slides and what words are on the slides. It unfortunately does not put the pictures in there. But how we would take this information and make it into a document is you would highlight all of your information, and I'm only going to do these 6 slides. And then you would go to a Word document, and we used our Google Drive because this allowed us to share our documents, and we were all able to type on it during the same time, which was great. We would paste it into a document like this, and this is an example of our mental health class, and this was our first exam. Here you can see in black is all of the text that was from the PowerPoints. In blue is our class notes, so what she had said, what she highlighted, what she said that wasn't in the PowerPoint, etc. And then we also added information from the NCLEX book, which would be in red. I don't really see much in this one, but we definitely used our NCLEX book a lot in other classes. What else do we have in here? And then green was our book notes. So this is how we split up our notes and how we were able to show everything and be able to work on the same document. So everyone in our group had a different role. And so one person's role was to take the PowerPoint and make it into a document format so that we all were able to type out class notes. Someone else's role who loved reading the book, and if you didn't watch my previous video, check it out because I am not a book reader, and it will explain all of my mistakes that I made freshman and sophomore year. Someone else was a book reader, and so she would go through, read the book, and add in information that felt good enough to make it into our study guide and was important information for us to know. I had the NCLEX book, and so did someone else, so we both kind of tried to put information from the NCLEX book into the study guide. Another person learned visually, so he added images and YouTube links that were able to break down the information that we were talking about into a visual format. So there's a lot of information that goes into our study guides. The PowerPoint, our teacher's lecture notes, our NCLEX book study guide, the actual class book study guide, YouTube videos of what information is good and helpful for our study guide. There's images that are helpful for what information we're talking about. There's a lot. That was 7 different sources of information that we compiled into one whole document to help us prepare. So one person also went through all of that information and broke down and deleted things that had repeated or that we just didn't need to know. So then there's another person, and this is the role that I took most of the time just from being this leader and being able to redirect and focus, is that when we would meet a week or 2 before our actual test, one person, which was most of the time me, but other people took this role, keeping the group focused. So it's easy to talk about things that we heard, things that are happening around campus, but this was our time to really focus and study this study guide. And every person was able to bring out their strengths and come together to help everyone succeed and learn this information. This is the best way that I studied and passed nursing school. And I suggest to find a study group that maybe aren't your best friends, because my best friends were the people who I studied with freshman and sophomore year. My best friends weren't the people who I studied with junior and senior year. And this made a difference. Completely. Another thing that we also did was we used our resources, finding Quizlets with example questions that were multiple choice or select all that apply related to our chapters in our textbook. These were key. These were key. That's all I'm going to say. These were key. It's hard to find them sometimes. It's hard to figure out what to search in to find these example questions, but these helped us so much. I kind of skimmed by junior year, especially Adulterian, because it was mentally tough for me. I ended up passing, so I was near the borderline of failing. Then comes childbearing and family health, I believe, and so the child and family semester was my junior year spring semester. This year was a lot easier for me because I found that the content was a little bit more easier, but granted I had a whole semester of the hard content. People thought that whatever class you took in the fall or took first was the harder one, and that the second one was easier. So depending on what you took first, whatever you take second is going to be easier than the first one. Adulterian clinical was based on bedside nursing and things that happen in the hospital. Child and family was not based off things in the hospital, and for me, knowing that I wanted to work in a hospital and be a bedside nurse, this clinical was a struggle. We went to either middle school, elementary school, and shadowed a school nurse for a couple times. We did a couple weeks of simulation where we were in the sim lab and going through a birthing simulation. We also did, what else did we do? Those are really the only things I remember, to be honest. But yeah, those were really the 2 clinicals that I remember. Those are the only 2 things I remember from family and child clinical. Even though they weren't necessarily the typical nursing clinicals, I still learned a lot, and I'm still grateful for all the opportunities that we did have. So senior year, I felt like it was one of the easiest years of nursing. It was different, but it was definitely easier than the past. Classes were more laid back. You actually knew your professors really well because you had them in past classes. Community health was one of my biggest struggles, and I don't know if I struggled because of the class itself or if it was because I knew I didn't want to be a community health nurse, or if I didn't really just understand all that community health nursing does and is. Just because this isn't my calling doesn't mean I don't respect the community health nurses or anything like that. So in community health, we also had a hands-on portion and with the Boys and Girls Club. Now, it didn't really feel like nursing. We didn't really follow nurses per se. I definitely did learn a lot more about like child development. I know the other group would go to like the nursing home home and have to present presentations on like foot care and stuff like that, and that just wasn't what we were doing. Did a lot of gardening with the children and teaching them how to cook and what healthy snacks were and how to choose healthy snacks. But even though community health class wasn't for me, I did learn a lot out of it, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I had. Another class that we took was mental health, and honestly, I learned so much out of this class. It was very similarly structured to our Adulterian class, and I learned so much about mental health, so many disorders, and it was very beneficial, and that was definitely one of my favorite classes my senior year fall. But we also learned about palliative care, which now looking back, I didn't really feel that palliative care was very important. We didn't see a lot of palliative care nurses or palliative care anything on our clinicals during the year, or at least I didn't. Although now, after working during a pandemic and being a floor nurse for a couple months now, palliative care is definitely present and there, and it's important to be able to console the family and to educate the family on what's going on and what type of barriers they may be facing outside of the hospital. And it's definitely an important class, and it was taught very well by one of my professors, and I enjoyed it a lot. We did watch a lot of more videos. It was hard to have a lecture on palliative care just because it is very situation based, more personal for every patient. There's a lot of different options of what people do. I really had a great semester the senior year fall. I was a senior volleyball. I was ending my collegiate volleyball career. I was doing really well in all of my classes. Something to note though is that from sophomore and junior year, we were using a program called HESI, and then my senior year spring, we changed our program to ATI, and then we also changed our passing rate, so you had to get like a 76 to pass on all of your tests average to pass the class. So our grading standards went up. I think that the program made the right choice on increasing the standards, as it does help you in the future, and it will help you towards the NCLEX and making sure that you know that information is important. So fast forward to senior year spring semester, honestly can't even tell you what classes I took. It was a blur, to say the least. We were only on campus until about March, just before spring break. We were getting ready for our capstone. I was excited to come down to the Minneapolis area and live with a friend and her parents and be able to work at this hospital. I was assigned a neuro unit, which was way out of my element, but I was excited to learn and excited to get back to that bedside care nursing. And we were supposed to go to our capstone after spring break, but 2020 had a whole different plan for us. This is when the pandemic kind of started and really hit the United States. I went home March 13th for my dad's 50th birthday, and I stayed home for an extra 3 months, and I ended up graduating online at home. And yeah, pandemic nursing school was very interesting. No one really knew what to expect. We had to make many course changes, and kind of just, you had to really work with the flow. We also were focusing more on NCLEX, studying techniques and tips, and we went through 2 courses of NCLEX preparation, an ATI program and then a HESI program. ATI version, what we had to do online, remote from home. I grew during those months. It was definitely, you learned how to be flexible, you learned how to get stuff done in a very chaotic environment. I quarantined both of my parents and my sister, and we had such a blast. You should go check out my COVID highlight on my Instagram, because that kind of just sums up our whole experience a little bit. But at that time, I just wanted to be done with school. I was putting in all the effort that I could and was getting the most out of everything. Pandemic nursing school was definitely difficult at that time. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about senior year other than that it was fairly easy compared to your other semesters, and I felt like I learned a lot from every situation, and I'm very grateful for my experience. I'm thankful to have been able to graduate with my BSN RN degree in 2020 from Bemidji State University. And yeah, that really sums up my nursing experience. If you made it this far, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe down below. But I'll see you in the next video. Bye!